Hi everyone, welcome back to RB Insights. I'm Dr. Ruby, and today we are going to explore a very important educational philosophy, perennialism. Before we dive in, if you have not subscribed yet, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up so you never miss out on important and interesting educational content. Now, let's get started. Have you ever noticed some flowers? They bloom year after year no matter the season. These are called perennial flowers because they last for a long time. Well, that's exactly where perennialism in education is about. It comes from the word perennial, which means everlasting or never ending. Perennialism believes that some ideas and knowledge are universal and timeless. That means that the same knowledge that was important 500 years ago is still important today. Now, let me ask you something. Do you think that education should focus on new ideas or should it emphasize old and timeless wisdom? There is no right or wrong answer. Every philosophy has its own perspective and relevance. So, take a moment and write your thoughts in the comment section below. I would love to hear what you think about this. Now that we have understood what perennialism is, let us talk about some of the most important thinkers who have shaped this philosophy. These philosophers are known as the exponents of perennialism, meaning they strongly believed in and promoted this educational approach. One of the earliest supporters of perennialism was Plato, the great Greek philosopher. He believed that true knowledge is eternal and can be discovered through reason and intellectual discussion. In his famous book, The Republic, he emphasized that education should focus on unchanging truths such as justice, morality, and reason. Aristotle, a student of Plato, also supported perennialist ideas but had a more practical approach. He believed that education should focus on universal truth and logical reasoning. He classified knowledge into different branches, including logic, ethics, and natural sciences, which are still studied in modern education. His famous school, the Lyceum, emphasized reasoning and critical thinking, which aligns with perennialist ideas. Moving to the medieval period, we have Saint Thomas Aquinas, a great Christian theologian and philosopher. He combined the idea of Plato and Aristotle with Christian beliefs, emphasizing that education should focus on unchanging morals and spiritual truths. His famous book, Summa Theologica, is still studied in theology and philosophy courses today, proving how perennialist ideas remain timeless. Fast forward to the 20th century, Robert Hutchins revived perennialism in modern education. He argued that schools should focus on the great books, classic works of literature, philosophy, and science that contain timeless wisdom. He criticized the trend of focusing too much on vocational skills and instead believed in teaching subjects that shape the mind and character. Mortimer Adler was another strong supporter of perennialism. He developed the Great Books program, which emphasized reading and discussing classical works by Plato, Aristotle, Shakespeare, and Einstein. He believed that true education should be about deep thinking, not just job training. So, as you can see, perennialism has been shaped by great philosophers across different centuries, from ancient Greece to modern era. Their ideas continue to influence education, proving that some knowledge is truly timeless. Now, please let me know in the comment section which of these philosophers do you find most interesting. Now, let's talk about metaphysics, which simply means the study of reality. Every educational philosophy has a different way of understanding reality. Perennialists believe that reality is constant and unchanging. They say that truth is not something that changes over time. It has always existed and will always exist. Let me give you an example. Think about mathematical truths like 2 plus 2 will always be 4, whether it is today, tomorrow, or 1,000 years from now. Similarly, even the law of nature, such as gravity, have always existed. Newton did not create gravity, he just discovered it. In the same way, perennialists believe that education should focus on these universal truths rather than temporary or modern trends. Now, let us talk about epistemology, which means how we gain knowledge. Perennialists believe that knowledge comes from reason and logical thinking. They say that students should not just memorize facts, but should analyze, question, and understand deep concepts. For example, imagine that you are learning about democracy. Instead of just memorizing the definition, a perennialist teacher will encourage you to read Plato, Aristotle, and other great thinkers who wrote about democracy centuries ago. Another example, instead of just accepting information, students should engage in debates and discussion to truly understand the ideas. So, in a perennialist classroom, students develop their critical thinking skills rather than just following new educational trends. Now, coming to axiology. Axiology deals with values and ethics. Perennialists believe that education should develop both intellectual and moral values in students. They emphasize truth, which means teaching ideas that have stood the test of time. They emphasize on goodness, which means instilling moral values through literature, philosophy, and religion. They also emphasize on beauty, which is encouraging appreciation for art, literature, and great works. For example, when students study Shakespeare's plays, they don't just read for entertainment, they learn about human nature, morality, and ethics. Alright, learners, now let us break down the core principles of perennialism, the foundation upon which this philosophy stands. Let's start with number 1. Knowledge is universal and timeless. Perennialists argue that truth does not change with time. The laws of physics, mathematical equations, and great philosophical ideas remain true forever. For example, whether we are in ancient Greece, medieval Europe, or the modern world, 2 plus 2 will always equal 4 and gravity will always pull objects downward. Point number 2. Focus on rational thinking and intellectual development. Perennialism trains students to think logically and critically. Instead of memorizing facts, students are encouraged to analyze ideas deeply. For example, when studying history, instead of just remembering dates, students must ask questions like, why did this even happen? What lesson can be learned from this? Point number 3. Emphasis on classical and great works. The best way to understand human nature and knowledge is through the great thinkers of history. Students read and analyze books by Plato, Aristotle, Shakespeare, and Einstein, figures who have shaped our understanding of the world. For example, if we want to understand justice, instead of just reading modern opinions, we study Plato's Republic, which has been discussing justice for over 2000 years. Point number 4. Moral and ethical education. Education is not just about knowledge, but also about character development. Students should learn values like honesty, justice, and discipline. For example, reading literature like Aesop fables teaches timeless moral lessons such as slow and steady wins the race. Point number 5. Teacher-centered learning. The teacher is the expert and the main source of knowledge. Students are expected to listen carefully, engage in discussion, and apply critical thinking. For example, in a philosophy class, the teacher might explain Socrates' ideas first and then guide students through a structured debate. In short, perennialism believes that education should focus on eternal truths, intellectual growth, and moral development. Now, let us understand the aims of education of this philosophy. Let us think, why do we educate students? What is the ultimate purpose of education in this philosophy? Perennialism has a very clear goal. Education should focus on universal truths that never change. Imagine this. If something was true 500 years ago and it is still true today, it will probably remain true in the future too. So, education should focus on these everlasting principles rather than fleeting trends or temporary knowledge. The main aims of education are to develop the intellect and rational thinking skills. The primary aim here is not just to provide facts, but to train the minds to think critically and logically. Next, cultivate moral and ethical values. Education should shape the character of students by instilling values like honesty, perseverance, responsibility, and justice. Next, prepare students for life, not just for seeking jobs. Perennialists believe education should not just be limited to career training or just learning skills for a specific job. Instead, students should develop wisdom that helps them understand life, society, and human nature. Next, promote lifelong learning. Learning does not stop after school. It is a lifelong process. So, a perennialist teacher will encourage students to continuously seek knowledge, question ideas, and expand their intellectual horizons. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever read a book or watched a documentary that make you think deeply about life? That's exactly where perennialist education aims to achieve. Deep thinking that lasts a lifetime. Now, let us talk about what students actually study in a perennialist classroom. The curriculum is not about learning trends or temporary subjects. Instead, it focuses on time-tested knowledge that has stood the test of time. So, the key features of the perennialist curriculum are that it focuses on the great books. Perennialism emphasizes reading and analyzing the works of great thinkers such as Plato, Aristotle, Shakespeare, and Einstein. These books basically contain ideas that have shaped human civilization and still offer wisdom today. Imagine reading Shakespeare's plays. Even though they were written centuries ago, they still teach us about love, betrayal, ambition, and morality. Next, subject that focuses on rational thought and critical analysis. Core subjects include philosophy to develop reasoning, mathematics to teach logical thinking, science to understand the natural world, history to learn from past events and decisions, literature to explore human experiences. Next, minimal focus on vocational or technical training. Unlike progressive education, which emphasizes job-specific skills. Perennialists believe that education should first train the mind and then practical skills can be learned later. For example, instead of just learning how to use Microsoft Excel, a perennialist curriculum would focus on understanding mathematics, logic, and statistics because these fundamental skills will always be useful even if technology changes. Next, emphasis on moral and ethical discussions. Education should shape character by discussing concepts of right and wrong, justice, and human nature. This is why subjects like philosophy, ethics, and religion are included. Let's think about this. Why do we still study subjects like history and philosophy, even though they are centuries old? The answer is that because they help us understand human nature, society, and the world. Now, how does a perennialist teacher actually teach? The teaching methods are quite structured and traditional because the focus is on logical thinking and deep understanding rather than personal opinions or preferences. The key teaching methods in perennialism would be lecture-based teaching. Here, teachers primarily use lectures to explain concepts and ideas. This is because knowledge is seen as something that must be passed down from experts, who are the teachers, to students. Imagine a history professor explaining the causes of World War II. Students listen carefully, take notes, and analyze the events logically. Next, discussion and debate on classic text. Students read and analyze the works of great thinkers like Aristotle, Aquinas, and Shakespeare. The teacher then guides discussion, helping students think critically about the text. For example, if students read Plato's Republic, they would discuss justice, leadership, and ethics, ideas that are still relevant today. Next, Socratic questioning. Teachers ask students deep, thought-provoking questions to help them analyze and evaluate ideas. For example, instead of just teaching what democracy is, a teacher might ask, "Do you think democracy is the best form of government? Why or why not?" Next, repetition and mastery of core knowledge. Students are expected to master subjects through practice, memorization, and repeated learning of fundamental concepts. For example, just like a musician must practice scales repeatedly to become a great pianist, students must revisit important knowledge until they truly understand it. I'm sure you must have heard this saying, practice makes perfect. That's exactly where perennialist education believes. Now, let us talk about the teacher's role in this philosophy. In a perennialist classroom, the teacher is not just a facilitator, they are the authority figure and the source of knowledge. The teacher's responsibilities are to act as a guide and intellectual mentor. The teacher's job is to pass down timeless wisdom and help students think deep about important ideas. Next, emphasize structure and discipline. The classroom is highly structured with a clear focus on learning, critical thinking, and intellectual development. Next, the teacher's role is to encourage deep intellectual discussions. The teacher uses Socratic questioning to challenge students' thinking. Next, less emphasis on student interest. Unlike modern student-centric learning, the teacher sets the curriculum and decides what is important rather than following students' preferences. Let me give you an example. Imagine a teacher explaining Newton's law of motion. They would not change the topic just because students find it difficult or boring. Instead, They would ensure students understand it deeply because it is fundamental knowledge that applies across all the time periods. Now, what about the student's role? In a perennialist classroom, students are expected to be active learners who engage with complex ideas, analyze information, and develop their intellectual abilities. So, the students are expected to listen attentively and absorb knowledge. They must be serious about their studies and focus on acquiring deep, meaningful knowledge. They must engage in critical discussions. They must think logically and participate in discussions that challenge their understanding. They must be disciplined and respectful. Since the focus is on structured learning, students must follow rules, respect the teacher, and take education seriously. Now, let me ask you, and please let me know in the comment section, do you think this teaching style works for everyone? Because some students may prefer hands-on learning, but perennialism believes that intellectual training is the best way to prepare for life. Now, let's talk about discipline in this philosophy. Since perennialism values intellectual growth, structure, and timeless knowledge, discipline plays a crucial role in maintaining an environment suitable for deep learning. Structured and orderly learning environment. The classroom follows a strict structure. Rules and routines are clearly established. Disruptions and distractions are not tolerated because learning is considered a serious pursuit. For example, students are expected to be punctual, attentive, and respectful in class. They cannot randomly interrupt or talk out of turn. Next, respect for authority and knowledge. Since teachers are seen as intellectual mentors, students must respect their guidance. Example, in a perennialist classroom, students do not call teachers by their first name or question their authority casually. Instead, they listen, absorb, and ask meaningful questions. Next, discipline through intellectual challenge. Rather than strict punishments, discipline is often maintained through intellectual engagement. For example, a teacher may challenge a disruptive student by asking a difficult question, forcing them to refocus and think critically. Next, moral discipline and character building. Perennialist education teaches students self-discipline by instilling values like patience, responsibility, and perseverance. For example, reading classic literature like the Odyssey teaches students the value of hard work and perseverance. Odysseus never gave up despite years of struggle. For discipline, there is a minimal use of reward and punishments. Unlike modern progressive education, perennialism does not focus on external rewards like stickers or prizes. Instead, students are taught to value knowledge and self-improvement as rewards in themselves. For example, a student is not given a gold star for reading a classic novel. Instead, the reward is the intellectual growth and wisdom they gain from it. So, in a perennialist classroom, discipline is not about strict punishments, but about maintaining order, respect, and focus on deep learning. Now, let us talk about what schools look like under perennialism. Since perennialism values structure, intellectual rigor, and classical knowledge, schools under this philosophy are quite traditional and focused on academic excellence. Schools are highly structured. They follow a strict schedule with clear rules, routines, and expectations. Learning is serious and disciplined, not casual or experimental. For example, schools have fixed timetables with subjects like philosophy, mathematics, and literature, and students must follow the curriculum without distractions. Next, the school focuses on classical subjects and liberal arts. The curriculum does not emphasize modern trends or technical skills, but instead focuses on foundational knowledge that is always relevant. So the subjects would include philosophy, mathematics, science, literature, history, and ethics. Example, instead of learning about modern social media trends, students study Aristotle's view on ethics and logic, which apply to decision making in all areas of life. Point number 3, the role of religion and ethics in schools. Many perennialist schools include moral and ethical education based on religious or philosophical teachings. For example, schools may teach students about Socrates' philosophy of virtue or religious stories that emphasize honesty, justice, and responsibility. Next, no focus on vocational training. Perennialist schools do not focus on preparing students for specific jobs like engineering, medical, or business. Instead, they focus on building strong intellectual abilities that can be applied in any career. For example, a student learning logic and philosophy in a perennialist school may later use those skills to become a lawyer, scientist, or a professor, but the school does not provide direct job training. So there was all on today's class on perennialism, philosophy of education. I hope you liked the video. Please let me know in the comment section, like, subscribe, and share. After listening to this lecture, if you have any questions relating to this philosophy, please feel free to write your question on the comment section below. I would love to answer them all. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next class.